Bioshock needs little introduction. It is commonly considered one of the best video games of its generation, if not all time. Bioshock represents video games maturing as a medium to many. I'm personally in both camps with a healthy dose of criticism on top. But how was such a game made? Well, that question has already been answered with extensive documentation. I mean, the remaster comes with a director's commentary hosted by Jeff Keighley. I could easily make an hour-long video just talking about the development of Bioshock. I'll do my best to summarize it instead, as this is a video review after all. Despite being released August 21st, 2007, the story of Bioshock begins in 1999 after the release of System Shock 2. A game so foundational to modern video games that I don't have time to explain. Go watch the Mandalore video to get a better sense of what I mean. While System Shock 2 was a critical success, it was a commercial dud. Thus, despite lead designer Ken Levine's pitch, Electronic Arts refused to fund a sequel. So the studio, Irrational Games, instead went on to make other critically acclaimed titles like Freedom Force, Tribe's Vengeance, and SWAT 4. But the need to make another System Shock game wouldn't go away. The core of what would become Bioshock was conceived in 2002, centered around the conflict between drones who gathered a resource, harvesters who wanted to steal the resource, and protectors of the drones. The next iteration of the idea, seen in 2004, would introduce plasmids, security systems to hack, and audio diaries to piece together the story. The core of the game was generally the same from there on out, with the details adjusting due to the ever-changing narrative. First, it was going to be a game in space focused on a cult deprogrammer, then it was going to be a secret World War II bunker built by the Nazis, before ultimately landing on the idea of a city under the sea. From there, the pieces began to fall into place. Even if reportedly Ken Levine could be rigid in his vision of Bioshock to the detriment of his fellow developers. To the point that much of Bioshock's staff would leave the company post-launch. Take-Two would initially fund development before outright buying Irrational Games in 2006. They also pulled what I consider to be a dick move by renaming the studio to 2K Boston right before Bioshock's release. I do want to point out that there is a sense that Bioshock was not even fully complete on release. A playtest in January 2007 resulted in a major change to Atlas's voice, the addition of an objective arrow, and major changes to the game's lighting. Time that could have been spent polishing, and it unfortunately shows. Ken Levine himself wishes he could have had an additional 6 months of development. But ultimately, with a final cost of $25 million USD, the game would release to the public, garnering critical acclaim. Sales were fairly strong, and Bioshock would ultimately sell 4 million copies by 2010. I wish I had the figures for the remasters, but unfortunately those aren't public. If you want to know more about the development of Bioshock, a great place to start is this Eurogamer piece by Simon Perkin. It provides a very human perspective to the development of Bioshock, in my opinion. Now that we have an understanding of the development, the question is, which version to play? When you buy the remastered version on Steam, it comes with the original PC port. Those with a high concentration of microplastics in their bodies will tell you to play the original port. Do not listen to them. It is a bad port. The game fakes widescreen, which results in the top and bottom of the screen getting cut off. I noticed it immediately because I couldn't see Jack's wrist tattoos when holding the wrench. And while the game may be running at 60 FPS, the physics and certain animations are running at 30 FPS. The resulting look is terrible, and I dislike it. And I'm not getting into the various little issues and fixes that may be required to get the game running. You are much better off avoiding the headache and playing the remastered version instead. It may not match your memories exactly, but it will run with less problems. Granted, there are still quite a few bugs. I'm pretty sure some are just part of the game's code at this point, like the brightness setting doing nothing in either port. Okay, with all that established, let's take a look at the game. To say that Bioshock is visually striking is an understatement. Every shot combines beauty and decay. An Art Deco nightmare. Rapture itself is as much of a character as any who speaks. Around every corner lies a story. A crucified smuggler, a family devastated by the loss of a daughter, and Sander Cohen's choice of art all convey the deeply twisted nature of Rapture's society. Not to mention the various bits of advertising and propaganda plastered everywhere. Plus, the fact that you are at the bottom of the ocean is deeply reinforced anytime you look out a window. Various sea life can be seen swimming about amongst the buildings, and it is not uncommon to see a Big Daddy wandering along the seabed. Of course, the environment isn't the only thing to look at. The denizens of Rapture deserve their own time in the sun. Splicers are the insane humans you will encounter throughout your stay in Rapture. Their faces and bodies are covered in growths and scars. Some even generate fire or electricity from within themselves. These are all caused by chronic atom usage. Splicer cells are being transformed into unstable stem cells that undergo cell growth or death at a rapid pace. While it results in fantastic powers, the only way to stave off the effects is more atom, which has diminished returns with each use. Effectively, genetic heroin. But it is a substance that is so vital that it has become the lifeblood of Rapture. That metaphor is further supported by the Little Sisters, children who have been implanted with a sea slug that is the true source of atom. Apparently, by having a host, the amount of atom produced is around 25 times as much as if the slug was by itself. This process grants them functional immortality, by the way. Thus, these little sisters wander about with their glowing eyes and tattered clothes. Though I would argue that the children of Rapture are deeply terrifying monsters with or without the slugs. The sisters gorge themselves on the leftover atom inside the many corpses within Rapture, effectively recycling it now that not enough can be produced to satisfy the need of splicers, which makes Little Sisters a priority target for any gang of splicers, resulting in the need for Big Daddies, hulking monstrosities that are the result of implanting the body and organs of a person into a mechanical diving suit. These guys come in many different forms too. Originally meant to perform manual labor on the exterior of Rapture, Big Daddies now devote their lives to the protection of Little Sisters, which isn't very hard to do when you're a walking tank fighting off the insane asylum. I'm not sure where else to mention it, but it's also made very apparent that these guys stink like all high hell, which is actually the work of pheromones attracting Little Sisters to them. It also causes a sister to believe that the giant murder tank is her best friend, Mr. Bubbles. I remember reading or hearing about how apparently the Little Sisters are seeing giant teddy bears wandering about with them, but I haven't been able to source that. Now, while Rapture may be visually stunning, surprisingly the audio is a bit of a drag at times. There's a wide range of quality in the sound work. Some things sound like they came right off an Xbox 360 disc, while others have a bit more of a remastered feel. It's hard for me to put into words without hearing it for yourself, so I'll let the game talk for a bit. At least the music stands out in contrast to the quality. There's quite a few licensed tracks in the game that are era appropriate. I'm not super comfortable playing the audio of certain rooms as a result. It can be haunting to hear a tune I recognize from elsewhere being played at a scene of a massacre. The soundtrack by composer Gary Scheinman also does a fantastic job at cementing an uncanny atmosphere, especially upon entering Sander Cohen's domain. That track is something otherworldly in how unsettled it makes you feel. According to Scheinman, some songs are composed to blend with the licensed music. I'm afraid for obvious reasons you'll have to do your own digging on that one. While audio quality may be an issue, audio content is not. Look, I don't need to tell you that the audio logs in Bioshock are legendary. You already know that. People will mock their size and placement forever, but they're not going to stop listening to Andrew Ryan when he starts talking about the great chain of industry.
I believe in no God, no invisible man in the sky. But there is something more powerful than each of us, a combination of our efforts, a great chain of industry that unites us. But it is only when we struggle in our own interest that the chain pulls society in the right direction. The chain is too powerful and too mysterious for any government to guide. Any man who tells you different either has his hand in your pocket or a pistol to your neck.
And that's because each and every voice actor in this game is phenomenal. Atlas especially.
Why do they wear those masks? Maybe there's a part of them that remembers how they used to be, how they used to look, and they're ashamed.
But it's not just the major characters. Random Splicers' ramblings make it clear that their minds are foregone from too much genetic tampering. Little Sisters are truly in their own little world with their descriptions being wildly different from reality. And the propaganda blasted over the intercom gives a clear reminder that the society of Rapture has fallen far from its founding ideals. Bioshock's vocal performances are so memorable that certain voice lines live in my head rent-free. The Circus of Values, the Ammo Bandito, and something about the haunting hymn of Jesus Loves Me being sung by a genetically deranged atom addict enraptures me. partly because of how religion is looked down upon in Rapture society, enough that it is contraband to be smuggled in, both for its content and for the risk of exposure to the outside world. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The gameplay is possibly the best introduction to immersive simulators out there. Yes, haha, I said the funny word with little commonly accepted meaning. But it's true. Of all these kinds of games, it holds your hand the most. There's a damn arrow at the top of your screen pointing you toward your objective. Vita chambers exist to provide a redo rather than a game over without requiring you to find an off switch like in System Shock. If the developers went any further, they might be playing the game for you. I'm only exaggerating slightly as I was getting tutorials well into the game about things I definitely knew how to do. Bioshock does lack that depth of exploration and open-ended objectives that many other seminal sims prominently feature. Ken Levine himself has called Bioshock a corridor shooter. However, that is not to say that the exploration doesn't exist at all. It is still encouraged through semi-secret areas in most levels. On the objective side, you are given leeway on how to deal with the Little Sisters. Save them, harm them, or leave them alone. That last one is the least viable option. As a new citizen of Rapture, you'll need Adam to upgrade your plasmids and tonics to maintain an edge in combat. Which means you'll be fighting lots of big daddies over and over again. I don't recommend trying to bash these guys with your wrench. Damn it, I'm getting ahead of myself again. It's really hard to try and talk about anything in isolation because elements of Bioshock are constantly looping in on and interacting with themselves. It is near impossible to talk about one thing without at least mentioning another, so apologies if this video feels a bit more scatterbrained than normal. The gameplay of Bioshock is best defined by its combat. The weapons themselves are fun to use even if they feel a bit underpowered. However, each weapon can use up to 3 ammo types which differ per weapon. Anti-armor and anti-personnel ammo are easy enough to understand, but then you have fantastical things like electric buckshot, something that is very handy for going toe-to-toe with Large Father. These weapons can be further upgraded at Power to the People stations. Upgrades range from damage increases to recoil reduction to clip size increases and more. The upgrades are often represented on the weapon in-game, often as a bit of clockwork machinery slapped onto the existing weapon. The weapons available to you are a revolver, Tommy gun, shotgun, makeshift grenade launcher, a napalm sprayer made of spare parts, a crossbow, and the almighty wrench. I tend to find these weapons to be overall a bit lackluster. It might be the fact that I play on hard, but the weapons of Bioshock feel a bit underpowered, even after getting damage upgrades and research bonuses. As a result, I tend to gravitate toward the same few weapons. Most of the time I stick with the revolver, Tommy gun, and shotty, with the grenade launcher as a big daddy deleter. I almost never use the chemical sprayer or crossbow in any of my playthroughs. I don't find the chemical sprayer to be that effective overall. You need both upgrades for it to feel useful. The crossbow takes too long between shots to be useful for me. Miss a shot and you might be screwed. The wrench is often my weapon of last resort. Though I did a wrench-focused build on my second playthrough, and boy did I have plenty of ammo for that game. There's something very satisfying about walking up and beating a splicer to a pulp. To round things out is a camera which can be used to take pictures of foes. Doing so will unlock more damage bonuses and various tonics. I obsess over those bonuses, so a lot of my footage is snapping tons of photos before laying waste to the subject. But, to paraphrase Suchong, weapons are only the canvas of combat. Plasmids are the paint. These are the various biomagic abilities that make this game all the more interesting. Telekinesis, electric shocks, pyrokinesis, and swarms of bees to name a few. With a single press of a button, you can switch between regular weapons and plasmids. Their use is governed by the amount of EVE in your system, represented by the blue bar under your health. You refill it by jabbing a hypodermic needle full of blue mystery liquid into your arm. Something that eventually feels normal because of how fucked up Rapture is in general. The plasmids can also have environmental effects. For example, shocking a body of water will electrocute enemies standing in it. Freezing an enemy allows you to walk up and beat them with a wrench until they break apart. Or you can thaw them out yourself with a little bit of fire. The scope of plasmids available to use can effectively allow you to approach almost any situation in whatever way suits your preference. While there is a wide range of plasmids to use, I personally often stick to the same 4 or 5 because they're so effective in comparison. In my experience, the use case for a fair number of plasmids is so specific that outside of them, they are functionally useless. Hypnotizing a big daddy is only useful if there is a big daddy around. It's much more effective to just shock, freeze, sting, or burn an enemy instead, which is why I tend to spend my Atom prioritizing tonics and stronger versions of my favorite plasmids. Tonics are another aspect of Bioshock that are vital to your success. They will provide various bonuses and abilities to your character. For example, Medical Expert causes health kits to heal more, and Eve Link causes them to provide a small amount of Eve. These tonics are split into 3 categories: physical, combat, and hacking. By their names, it should be fairly obvious at what they affect. An important note that many players may not know is that tonics can stack their abilities, resulting in some busted builds. My wrench build is a fairly good example, even if it isn't optimized to death. I'm super fast, can sneak up on enemies easily, and can whack people really hard, among other things. Tonics and by extension plasmids can be swapped around at gene banks found across Rapture. I only wish it was easier to swap around the placement of plasmids in the slots and that upgrading a plasmid didn't swap around its place on the bar. That second part really annoyed me throughout the entire game because my muscle memory couldn't keep up with reality. I would sometimes switch to the wrong plasmid and spend time trying to find the one I actually wanted to use, all while I'm getting shot at and beaten by Atom Fiends. Across the city exists a vast security system meant to protect the property and citizenry. In reality, it is a means by which Ryan enforced his will upon Rapture. The best thing to do to avoid being seen by a security camera or filled with holes by a sentry gun is to destroy them. The next best thing is to get them on your side. Hacking is an entirely optional mechanic that is more of a necessity for me, mostly because I love the pipe minigame. Something about there being a little puzzle around every corner satisfies a part of my brain. You uncover tiles and move pipes around to connect an entrance with an exit, all while liquid flows into the pipe, creating a visual time limit. The pipes come in various forms that change the direction and speed of the liquid flow. Complicating things are alarm and overload tiles hidden on the board. Overloading a machine will hurt you, while sounding the alarm brings the sentry bots. This whole minigame can also be bypassed by either using an automatic hacking tool or by spending money, which may be necessary for some. Everyone I've ever talked to either loves or despises Bioshock's hacking minigame with their whole being. I have yet to see any in between. I also think it's important to note that when you hack things in Bioshock 1, time will stop while you play the minigame, unlike a certain sequel. Though security systems are not the only hackable things in Rapture. Safes, health stations, and various vending machines can also be turned in your favor. Usually this results in products being cheaper and some additional ones being for sale. Even in its death throes, free market capitalism reigns supreme in Rapture. While searching for money, you may also find random bits of junk. This junk can in turn be brought to a U-Invent booth to create ammo, hacking tools, and various tonics. Bloodlust is a hard requirement for a wrench build, by the way, so make sure you get that. Every hit will give you back some health and Eve, something that is very useful for staying alive in wrench-based combat. All that being said, I personally don't use this crafting system nearly as much as I should. You can make the ammo needed to solve any problem. My issue is that I rarely even use most of the special ammo because I am saving it like my hundreds of potions in Skyrim. Like, I don't think I use proximity mines at all during one of my recorded playthroughs. As far as the AI goes, well, it's actually fairly simple. Enemies will attack you on sight and run away if they take too much damage, often in the direction of the closest health station. I tend to destroy those to avoid a splicer healing themselves and to get a free health kit to boot. But the overall AI isn't very complex, which may sound strange because if you played this game, you know that the enemies can lay ambushes for you. Surely they are more complex than what I'm claiming. Well, you are feeling that way because of a phenomenon I call the fear effect. See, the enemies of 2005's Fear are somewhat legendary because of their complexity. Only it's a perception of complexity and not actual complexity. The enemies of Fear are not that much more complex than those of Bioshock. It is through a staggering number of voice lines and clever scripting that makes them seem much more real. Which brings me back to Bioshock because Irrational are doing the same thing here. Almost every ambush is a scripted event that will mostly play out the same between playthroughs. The sequence where you get the shotgun is a perfect example. None of that is organic, it's all script-based. Enemies will only appear when you pick up the shotgun, the same number of enemies will appear each time, same with the number of Houdini Splicer ambushes in Arcadia. The factor that prevents these sequences from feeling outright scripted are the organic events that can happen, which is respawning splicers in areas that you have already explored. Granted, some of these are scripted too, but enough aren't that it makes you feel never completely safe. You never know who might be around the next corner, and the scripted ambushes only heighten the sense of anxiety. ultimately causing the enemies to feel like a pack of genetically disturbed psychopaths creeping around every corner. As far as criticism goes, well, the most obvious one is the final boss. It sucks. But Irrational have never made a good final boss fight, so whatever.
Nah.
My biggest critique lies within the story, so I'm gonna be a bit vague here. It is in my opinion that the last third of the game should have been heavily reworked. I cannot say any more without immediately diving into the rant I'm saving for spoilers. Let's just say that the reason why I play the game changes at a certain point. Another critique I have is the deeper you go, the more the game starts to feel like it's falling apart at the seams. Audio diaries will start playing themselves, sometimes on repeat, text will often fail to appear even though the font was working a level ago, a security camera won't take any damage from my wrench after I lit it on fire, the chemical sprayer won't damage an enemy if their model clips through the sprayer's model in just the right way. Hell, when editor Nate was playing this game last year, he had a scenario where he got stuck behind a door that wouldn't open and was forced to reload his save. I could go on and on, but the point I'm making is that Bioshock really could have used another 6 months of development. I'd like to think that some of these issues might have been ironed out if they had gotten that time. Oh, and one more thing. Why are there so many dead cats? Who on the team was so opposed to the cats that they felt the need to litter Rapture with them? I want answers, and I doubt I will ever get them. The story and lore of Rapture are truly what take Bioshock to the next level for me. Rapture is a city built at the bottom of the damn ocean by an egomaniac who believes any form of government without him at the head is parasitic, not out of fear of nuclear war like the novelization wants you to believe. Through audio logs, you can hear Andrew Ryan as he declines from dickbag into despot. His achievements and failures are what define the very city itself. But he is not the only great man in the city. The second titan of Rapture was Frank Fontaine, a con man and mobster whose smuggling funded the science behind Adam and Little Sisters. That was until Andrew Ryan had him assassinated and seized his assets. These actions disillusioned many members of Rapture's society who felt like they were nothing more than slaves to be trampled upon by the powerful, a direct consequence of Andrew Ryan's own philosophy. This gave birth to Rapture's third titan, Atlas, an Irishman who led the disaffected in a rebellion against Ryan culminating in civil war, causing Rapture to fall into its current state. And you are Jack, some poor bastard whose plane has crashed in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, forced to brave the remains of Rapture in an attempt to survive, all while being hunted by an increasingly paranoid Andrew Ryan for daring to set foot into his city. I think that's about as far as I can go without major spoilers. If you want to avoid being spoiled, I strongly suggest skipping to the timecode on screen. For those of you who remain, would you kindly take a seat and have a listen to what I have to say? Ah, Rapture. Never have I seen such a wretched hive of scum and villainy. Your entrance into the city is an absolute marvel to behold, followed by the horrors of life in the city. Thankfully, local labor agitator Atlas is here to help, along with Tenenbaum, the creator of the Little Sisters. Early on, she provides you the means to save Little Sisters rather than follow Atlas's advice to permanently end their suffering. In his eyes, they aren't little girls anymore, just monsters. Atlas guides you through Rapture as you fight off the hordes of splicers under Andrew Ryan's pheromone-based control. Atlas is willing to help you escape the city so long as you save his family, a task that is complicated by their submersible exploding. With the only conceivable means of escape destroyed, the only way out seems to be eliminating Andrew Ryan's hold over the city. But Ryan would sooner see his city destroyed than risk letting you live, going so far as to destroy the trees in Arcadia and the botanists who maintain them, effectively wiping out Rapture's self-sustaining oxygen supply. After a brief detour to ensure you can breathe, you wander into the territory of Sander Cohen, an eccentric artist who is also quite the dangerous psychopath, a man who will do anything for his art, including posing and plastering corpses to make crude imitations of living statues. After following through with his demands to finish his masterpiece, you can either take him out or just leave him to rot at the bottom of the ocean. You can meet him again later if you let him live, but I didn't capture any footage of that particular interaction. I don't think he deserves to live. Not after he influenced the demise of Anna Culpepper for daring to sing the truth. Afterwards, it is to the gates of Andrew Ryan's office where you find a grisly sight. Bodies stuck to pillars with Ryan taunting you over the radio about what happens to traitors and thieves in the city. It is especially mournful because this is the final resting place of my favorite side character, Bill McDonough, a simple English plumber who, by taking personal pride in his work, impressed Andrew Ryan enough to make him Rapture's general contractor. McDonough is the man who did the actual work to build the city under the ocean. You can find audio logs all around Rapture that are mostly him complaining about leaks or how Rapture is slowly falling apart due to Ryan's megalomania. He recognized something that Ryan couldn't. They're in power because people trust them. Lose that trust, and you lose the city. Eventually, Ryan lost McDonough's trust too. A failed assassination attempt landed him here on the wall. One EMP bomb later, and you are in the office of Andrew Ryan. In retaliation, Ryan activates Rapture's self-destruct sequence. Of course this egotistical jackass rigged his underwater city to explode. If he can't have it, no one can. What a child. Before you get to the office, you find a room that gives away the upcoming twist, even if you may have figured out part of it by now. The scene itself is still legendary.
The assassin has overcome my final defense, and now he's come to murder me. In the end, what separates a man from a slave? Money? Power? No. A man chooses. A slave obeys.
Ryan makes it apparent that you are little more than a puppet, playing to the tune of those who say, "Would you kindly?" Furthermore, you are the progeny of Ryan, the result of a mistress who sold an embryo to Frank Fontaine. That embryo would have its growth accelerated by Adam, and the resulting man would be sent outside Rapture with false memories. An insurance policy for Frank Fontaine should the worst occur. The ultimate agent who fulfilled his purpose without ever knowing it. Because you see, well, I'll let Atlas take it from here.
Nice work, Bio. It's time to end this little masquerade. There ain't no Atlas, kid. Never was. Selling my line of work takes on a variety of aliases. Hell, once I was even a Chinaman for 6 months. But you've been a sport, so I guess I owe you a little honesty. The name's Frank Fontaine.
Again, this shit is legendary. Frank Fontaine never died, he simply took on another identity in a long line of fake ones. Fontaine isn't even his real name, just one he happened to steal from an old rum smuggler to get access to Rapture in the first place. Atlas was simply a means to an end, that end being complete control over Rapture. And now the only thing left for Fontaine is to tie up loose ends. Thankfully, Tenenbaum then provides you with shelter in her orphanage. Depending on how you treated the little sisters, it will either be a welcoming or standoffish place. Tenenbaum managed to undo some of your mental conditioning, but to remove it all will require traveling to the home of your other creator, Dr. Su Chong. Unfortunately, Fontaine isn't just going to let you wander about. He orders your heart to stop, causing your health bar to decrease continually. And it is here where I realize every time that I am now playing Bioshock out of obligation and not for fun. I am really not a fan of this last third of Bioshock. Partly because of the game mechanics that are forced upon you, but also partly because of the narrative itself. I will die upon the hill that Bioshock should have ended with Fontaine's takeover of Rapture. Ryan's elimination is a natural bookend to the story. Yeah, it would require restructuring the entire last third of the game along with major story rewrites, but this is my unreasonable passionate rant. I'm going to say what I want. On that note, Bioshock 2 should have been the full proper journey to wipe out Frank Fontaine, and then Bioshock 3 could have been the story of Sophia Lamb. Infinite can stand in the corner for now. I don't remember it enough to form an opinion beyond aerial racism and multiverse theory. But the game from here on in is all the parts of Bioshock I outright dislike. From the shrinking of your health bar, to losing control of your plasmids, to becoming a big daddy. You would think that last one would be super cool, but instead all you get is obstructed vision, Big Daddy voice, 25% damage reduction, and loud footsteps. The one cool part of the Papa Grande sequence is when you go through a Big Daddy training course while protecting a little sister. Though you may lack the weaponry, it does give you a sense of what it might be like to play a Big Daddy, something that Bioshock 2's entire identity is built upon. But that's a topic for another video. I'm still mad at the last part of this game for how bad these mechanics make it feel to play, especially when there's still great content to be found like Diane McClintock's perspective on the people's struggle in the tenements of Rapture. The long and short of the remainder of the game is a revenge quest against Frank Fontaine for pretty obvious reasons. You first find the MacGuffin to stop your health from dropping at the cost of losing control of your plasmids. Effectively, your equipped plasmid will randomize every couple of minutes, so you have no way of knowing what will come next. Very fun to play with an entire half of my kit now useless to the current situation. I love it. Obtaining the second MacGuffin will stop that. Now it is time to go after Fontaine. He displays his powers before bravely running away. Fontaine breaks a door, requiring you to become a Big Daddy in order to get a little sister to open it. Aforementioned Big Daddy training course, which is good comparatively, but is still an escort mission at its core, so gross. Take an elevator up to somewhere to find that Fontaine has become the Atlas statue outside the Rockefeller building in New York City. Ignore the fact that Big Daddy Vision is missing. Who cares why it's gone? I'm glad I can see again. This fight is stupidly simple. Depending on your build and difficulty, it is either really easy or really hard. There are no Vita chambers, so death means a hard restart. Hit him until he gets back into his atom machine, suck out the juice, rinse and repeat. Much fun. Do that enough times and the little sisters will finish the job themselves. From here, the game can end in a few different ways. It all depends on if you saved all the little sisters or harvested any of them. There will be subtle differences in the game itself, but those are mostly relegated to gifts and the frequency at which Tenenbaum talks to you. In the bad endings, Jack takes control of Rapture before eventually unleashing the splicers upon the world above. The difference between the two is Tenenbaum's tone. Sacrifice them all and she's mad. Sacrifice all but one and she's sad. Real intriguing stuff. The canon ending, as far as anyone is concerned, is the good ending. Jack escapes into the world above with 5 little sisters in tow. Time passes, but they never forget the compassion Jack showed, culminating in them all being by his side at his deathbed. I'm not crying, you are. And thus, the story of Rapture comes to a close. For now. I think it's fair to say that Bioshock is a flawed masterpiece. The combination of satisfying gameplay, effective storytelling, and Rapture's visual aesthetic are second to none. Except maybe Bloodborne. But the deeper you go, the greater the jankfest becomes. To me, it is a prime example as to why there is no and never will be a perfect game. Bioshock is weirdly bugged in so many ways, and yet it is compelling to play. I may feel an obligation to complete the game, but it is one out of respect for the entire work. I just can't pretend that an entire third of the game doesn't exist, even if I really want to, because then it would mean discounting the parts of the game I enjoy. They stand out because of the parts that are hard to enjoy. So, for one, I strongly recommend you play Bioshock at least once in your life. It makes you appreciate the medium of video games for the things only it can do. You can find Bioshock on Steam and GOG for $20 normally, and it goes on sale fairly often. With the review over, I guess now is the best time to say I'm going to be working on videos for both Bioshock 2 and Infinite. You can thank my roommate for requesting I make a video about Bioshock for the upcoming rabbit hole I will find myself in. Due to how my production pipeline works, it won't be coming out right away. I have plans for other smaller games that will hopefully tide you all over in the meantime. Anyways, that's enough rambling about the future. I'm sure you have something better to do. Thanks for watching. More garbage to come. Oh yeah, and there's also a bunch of challenge rooms, but no one cares about them, so they got relegated to the last seconds of the video.